Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonas nberger. I am the company speaker for 1IO and a novelist, so I have no background in tech. And I joined the space in 2020 when I realized this space is where one of the greatest stories to tell is. And my ambition was to tell a story to more people than the ones that know about the space. And so together with 1IO, I've written the first Web3 thriller. It's a fiction book, and it tells a story about a college boy named Adam with 3 of his friends who have this idea of giving the power back to the people and to enable the people to realize true data ownership. And maybe you're wondering what this all has got to do with how to invest in DePIN. I'll get to that in a second, but hopefully at the end of the book I've achieved in a suspenseful way to tell the readers this very fact. That data is the new gold, and in fact it can be described as gold. Data is valuable, data is highly desirable, and data is tradable. But this is not news, right? This is something the big players have realized years ago, and their whole business model has around that fact, and we all know those big players. And we, the users, don't have a real say on what is happening with our data, and on top of that, we have become completely and utterly transparent, which is fucking scary, excuse my French. But we produce a shit amount of data each day. Our phones, our laptops, our smartwatches, our fridges, even our vacuum cleaners produce huge amounts of data that flow into some servers abroad and gets analyzed and cross-referenced. And it's scary because we don't have any say whatsoever what's happening with it. And Web3 and its visionary thinkers, the blockchain, this whole cut the middleman mindset in the space, this promises an alternative, and in essence it's just power to the people. And now finally, and now I get to the DePIN part, we are finally able to unlock the next level of Web3 and enabling true data ownership through true decentralization and true democracy in the digital world. So there's this cryptic buzzword going around recently, DePIN, which stands for Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks, and basically just refers to infrastructure projects using tokenization to coordinate and incentivize in their bootstrapping phase. And individuals, you, me, everyone, we build up the supply of infrastructure in a decentralized manner and get rewarded with token incentives that potentially increase in value. So the key idea here is to flip the traditional model on its head. The traditional model, of course, being I'm a big corporate, I need computing power, where do I go? In Europe, most likely to AWS or other providers. But the thing is, I am renting infrastructure and they can pull the plug. And this could be a bad thing. So Web3 companies have this idea of outsourcing the whole process to all the network participants and thereby reach high or even higher coverage rates. Because if you look at it like this, and I'm highly simplifying here, but this is a small data center. This has more computing power than the guys on the Apollo rockets had when they traveled to the moon. This is scary once again, or incredible, I don't know. This is a small data center. If this beamer has Bluetooth or is in any way connected or smart, is it a small data center? There's a small data center. Anyone's wearing a smartwatch, Apple Watch is a small data center. You get the picture here. So, meaning every smart device or connected device could be a small data center, and the computing power can be fueled into a network. And of course, this is also true for real data centers, facilities with servers in them and a facility manager cleaning the floors and stuff like that, right? So this is also true for the conventional true model for data centers. For example, they only use 80% of their capacity, and the rest of the 20% could be fueled into such a decentralized network. So this whole infrastructure gets used so that decentralized applications can run on that. So the whole token thing behind that is actually the same liquidity incentive principle used in other Web3 sectors that we all know, such as DeFi, came to earn, or gamify, or move to earn, etc. And now, once this concept is understood, you can subcategorize the whole DePIN sector into 4 smaller sectors, which are cloud storage networks. For example, Filecoin is a well-known example. They provide a decentralized alternative to common cloud storage networks. Wireless networks like 5G, sensor networks that collect real-time data, or the network fueling the Internet of Things. For example, a helium network. They basically create the means for better and more fluent device communication in the Internet of Things. As I said, you have your smart fridge, you have your watch, you have your car, and what they want to reach is that all these things can communicate together, which would be great. And last but not least, you have energy networks. Now, you're totally right when you want to scream out, but that stuff exists already, because it does, yes, but it's the technological foundation, and it's the ideological foundation behind that, and the organization that makes it actually quite revolutionary. As I said, for the first time, we have the real chance to enable this great sentence, which is power to the people. You can build infrastructure 10 to 100 times faster because you use existing computing power. And the whole thing is definitely better synced to hyperlocal market needs. It can be thereby far more cost-effective, and it can be scaled across jurisdictions in a permissionless way. The network is neutral, and most importantly, it is collectively owned. So no direct place to pull the plug here. And the blockchain can provide for trustless payments, and of course, thereby the integration with DeFi. So for me personally, this whole DePIN idea is the missing keystone in the Web3 space. Realize all of that, what Web3 is about. And projects in DePIN for me are a very concrete way of approaching true decentralization and true democratization of the digital world. And the main reason why I named the slide how I named it, with DePIN we can finally reach broader connectedness and, more importantly, broader interoperability in the space. One of the main problems I see in Web3 today is you have many great projects, great solutions out there that tackle one very specific piece of problem. But sometimes they forget the bigger picture here is you could unlock a way greater potential in Web3 if we created solutions that would work together right from the start. So once again, this is why I'm saying you need interoperability, and one aspect of that is the infrastructure down there. Now, let's talk some numbers. A $3.5 trillion market, that's a lot of zeros. Here's why. Oh, and please duly note, this is no investment advice. Short disclaimer, I have to say it. Where do I get that number from? In January, Misari, who are great, published the DePIN sector map. And you can see here, you have storage networks, you have CDN networks, VPN networks, compute networks, and specific purpose compute, which add up to server networks. Then you have wireless networks with some subcategories, sensor networks and energy networks. I talked about those already. And if you combine all of this, according to the data they work on, you get a number which is $3.5 trillion. And there's one quite interesting aspect to that number, because just on a side note, with the rising demand for AI, and when you have rising demand for AI, there will most definitely be rising demand for hyperlocal, time-sensitive, and verifiable data, high-quality training data. And all of this can be enabled through DePIN. So one might actually say that $3.5 trillion is a pessimistic estimate. Time will tell, right? Of course, when investing in a new space, such as DePIN, one should always be aware of this. And this is an important point because it's true for most of the other Web3 sectors as well. Innovation is faster than regulation. And innovation is way faster than regulation. And yes, so there are regulatory uncertainties in the DePIN space, of course, but it's with every other innovation on the planet. If you're amongst the first to invest, you are amongst the first to create the biggest impact as well. And as you almost certainly know, where there's high risk, there's potentially very high returns. And on another side note, since this probably goes without saying as well, the big wave of ICO-related scams might have subsided a bit, but there are still some shady projects that just aren't legit, meaning quite simply, please do your own research and do it properly. And if you aren't one yourself, seek advisory from a tokenomics specialist, because this is such an integral part of DePIN, and you should seek advisory from someone who really gets that. So ideally, the cost of building a decentralized physical infrastructure network are borne by and distributed among the supply side participants. And once the network has built an infrastructure base, it attracts users. These users pay to use the network or contribute infrastructure themselves and get paid, which in the best case kicks off, attention, buzzword, a virtuous cycle of more demand fueling more supply, which is incentivized by tokens that grow potentially in value thanks to growing demand. That's nice. Now, the space is new, and yes, there are already many projects out there, but DePIN is still struggling a bit to find a universal narrative for a greater awareness out there. And infrastructure is the one thing. But infrastructure with no applications to run on that is a whole nother story. So what we need to do on the other hand is build cool applications that people want to use. As I said, Web3 is darn complicated. There are so many apps out there that nobody wants to use because it's too complicated and nobody gets the real purpose here. So we need, on the other hand, to create cool applications that people want to use. And one man to build exactly that is my dear colleague and friend and the founder of 1IO, and here to tell you more about 1IO. We call it Connecting the Dots, our following panel. Building a truly decentralized ecosystem. Please welcome to the stage my dear colleague, CEO and founder of 1IO, Markus Kuhnert. Do we have a second microphone? Great.
Thank you.
I would just shut up for a second and let you introduce yourself and maybe get some facts down about your background.
We'll try to keep it short. So, so I'm in the software business for almost 30 years, and we build enterprise solutions for big corporates like Siemens, Microsoft, McDonald's, Red Bull. And we develop full stack, so the hard foundations up to the application, up to basically what the common user uses, to hosting, to servicing everything. And obviously this gave us lots of experience, and also we built a lot of technology, especially in a very decentralized way or distributed way. And this is what I want to talk about now, about distributed and decentralized technology and also decentralized infrastructure.
Maybe real quick, you tell us the story of how 1IO came into existence, because the story he just told was Brandguardian, the existing software company from which 1IO is evolving.
So
what's the key idea behind 1IO?
So 1IO is basically a spin-off to bring those benefits and the technology we developed to basically the common person, you and me and everyone. And what we wanted to do is basically bring the benefits of decentralization to everyone, to build a system which allows you true data ownership, true decentralization, because, for example, 90% or 95% of the projects you saw there, they may work in a decentralized way and also they're distributed, but actually they're owned by a certain instance which still can control it. So although they run on blockchain, the blockchain is controlled by someone. And our vision is to build something which is not only technically decentralized, but also organizationally, which means There's no way to temper it, and there's no central instance to shut down. So
Power to the people.
Power to the people. And to some like extent also, Bitcoin is like is centralized actually. They're like servers being operated by miners, and there are users which are consuming it. So if you manage to shut down the one side or control the one side, you also affect the users. And if you look now what's happening with those ETFs, BlackRock and so on, which basically provide Bitcoin as a service, if you look at BlackRock, they're getting beteiligt, yeah, with mining companies and so on. They're trying to gain more control over how Bitcoin is being produced, is being mined. And you all know about the 51% problem. So if they gain a certain amount of power, they can take over Bitcoin. And there goes your decentralization. And what we actually built is something which runs on everyone's personal mobile device. And for example, if you are a group of people and you have an interaction, you actually start to run your own platform, just the 3 or 5 people of you, without any external dependencies.
You don't need Wi-Fi.
You even don't need Wi-Fi, because we can use like Bluetooth protocols to interact with each other.
It's completely peer-to-peer.
It's completely peer-to-peer. Not only peer-to-peer in the sense of that you cut the middleman, but also peer-to-peer that you do not need to use public infrastructure like internet. You can use your private infrastructure. And I mean, looking at the time, I'll have tomorrow a presentation where we show more about it, about the technology, how it works, how it's connected, so you can get a better impression how it works. And we feel now is the time to get out with this. So we've built like 6 years on the foundations, on the technology, and we're at the moment at the point where we now start to build the solutions on top. And one of the first solutions we built, or applications we built on top, is actually a messaging system, which is as easy to use as in WhatsApp, but you don't have the middleman, so you do not talk to Meta, and Meta talks to you. So we always say, talk to friends, not to servers. Right. And by cutting these instances out, you actually now get into a point where you can control your data. So you can define who gets to see what and on which infrastructure it is being operated. Right.
So, in short, we are building the foundation for a truly decentralized ecosystem, because we most certainly cannot think of every solution to every problem there might be, and that's why we make it interoperable and also provide a software development kit which is universal and completely open source. That's another important point to add here. And why we start with the messenger is because we think it's the most important and tiniest piece of process we could think of. And it's not only for communications between humans, but also communication between humans and machines. If you want to talk to your fridge, feel free. And for your fridge to talk to your car. So machine to machine, humans to machine, and most importantly, humans to humans. And this whole thing, hopefully one day, becomes truly human-centric, right?
Exactly, because we see new players coming into the space, also in terms of AI, which is a part of the network, basically. And we see all these centralized islands, basically. So you have ChatGPT, you have this and here and there, and they're all like isolated, and it's up to the people to basically copy and paste to get more out of the system. And we want to make AI a real player within such ecosystems. So that means, and by the way, an AI is just as good as the data you share with it. So it needs training data. And imagine such an ecosystem with your own data becoming
more on that tomorrow.
A marketplace. More on that tomorrow. And we think you as a user should be in control, again, which data you share with your AI, but also being able to leverage like your own personal AI. I mean, every smartphone has some kind of AI chip on it, which you could leverage for your own purpose, but it's local and there's no need to share it with the cloud, with Apple, or with whoever. And that's what we want to leverage in our project.
Data ownership is a human right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any technical questions, please direct to this gentleman.
So you spoke about catchphrasey term hyperlocal something? Hyperlocal market needs to, I got that bit. The bit that alarmed me was talking about ownership of your own data and then talked about AI. Now, AI as it currently stands is not actually artificially intelligent. It is merely applied machine learning.
Exactly.
In order to be applied machine learning, it needs to be able to build millions, if not billions, of bell curves using data. Yeah? So, if you control your own data, and other people control their own data, how is AI relevant to this pitch?
Well, you want to use AI as an assistant, basically. It needs
in order to
other
function
people's
well,
data.
Any of these things are going to need vast amounts of data, and they need to have data sets. Now, either you're using somebody else's data sets and building on it with some augmentation, or you're opening other people's data up.
Well, the point is, if you control your data, you can also control who gets to read and see the data, and you can market your data. So, for example, if you have your local, we call it a co, it's a circle of operation. It could be humans, it can also be your smart devices. You collect, sorry for that word, but a shit ton of data every day. And this data is basically going everywhere, and you have basically no real control what kind of data is being created, how it's being used, other than for, the main purpose. So you're buying a smart vacuumer, and this thing has a camera, it has a microphone, it has all sorts of sensors. Obviously, that's being used to operate this thing, but all this data is being transferred to China. Do you know what's happening with the data over there? So you have no control, basically. And in our world, you can actually own this data. You can collect this data, and you can decide who this data is being shared with, and in a local way on your infrastructure, and you can also market this data to third parties. So, for example, the technology we built, you can encapsulate data into a smart contract, which means you can have actually an AI looking for specific data in this ecosystem and actually offering you basically a payment for it, for the AI to learn about it. So you, for example, you could build a sensor network with your colleagues in a co, and you could market this data with smart contracts.
So you're talking about smart contracts. That's going to mean that you're using a blockchain. Which one?
We're not using a blockchain. That's another interesting part. We've built our own ledger technology, which is not a common blockchain. But the interesting part here is it's completely interoperable with any blockchain out there. So you can integrate any network you want. And we're going to completely open source it, which means you can integrate your own tools and networks. And Jonas?
Yeah, I have to add something to that, because to a certain extent, for example, I like to share my data for the YouTube algorithm because it works darn good, and when I watch a video, I like the proposition. It makes me look at this video. This is good. I like to give my data to the algorithm. When I could I can, with this concept, monetize my data and put it on a data marketplace, because you ask the questions. People have to deliver data to a certain extent, of course, and to a certain extent, I, as a user, would do that if I controlled it, right? So we have this concept of the data marketplace. More on that tomorrow, but there will be data available, and for instance, there on the data marketplace, you can monetize your own data, right?
Exactly. Yeah. There's also the piece of identity. So obviously you need a measure which is data credible. Is it good? Is it verified? and you need to manage this entire identity layer, which comes with the solution too. And yeah, that's also a very vital part.
I may also have a question to the very simple usage. The last sentence you say data is human right is quite impressive. I agree. For the practice usage of message, that two, for example, three people can connect with each other via Bluetooth in their phone, and they don't need any middleman. This is a great idea.
No.
So what I'm wondering is does it work if we are in a very long distance? For example, I'm in China, you are in Switzerland.
Yes.
Okay, it works. Okay, that's
course.
fascinating. Okay.
So obviously you can use internet if it's there, but it's used in a very secure way. So it's basically like a VPN connection from one device to the other device, and there is basically nothing in between, so you can't tamper with it. And it's fully encrypted, and the encryption is based on your consensus with the other person or within this code. So if you're not part of this membership, there's no way to access this data and also the connections which are being established.
Okay, so that means, for Bluetooth, normally we have a limit on distance that we can be to the device that we connect. But for that one, you mean there's no limit on the distance. Okay, on the other hand, I'm thinking if we send video, for example, 4K or data that are quite huge, we need a space to save those data. And how do we solve this problem?
Exactly. We have built exactly for that reason a technology in our previous company. It's called GFS, which is sort of a virtual distributed file system, which we now put basically into OneIO. And this allows you to use your local infrastructure to be shared. So for example, if you're a video cutter and you're producing videos with huge amounts, obviously you cannot really use tools like Dropbox or any of the other tools out there because you need to upload it to somewhere in the cloud to be stored. And if you want to process it, you need to download it to your local device in order to work with it. And due to our technology, we can leverage local connectivity and peer-to-peer. So for example, if you have like a basic storage at home and it's connected with 10 gigabit, you can use this as a local storage to work with, but it's at the same hand, it's shared within your co. So that means if you allow access to other people, you can share this infrastructure. And there's a lot about sharing also in our system. So for example, if you use the messaging app and you're like 3 or 4 people, you cannot only share your infrastructure of your 3 mobile devices, but also other infrastructure you have within your network. So for example, a server or a Wi-Fi box with an attached hard disk or whatever you have in order to make it more resilient.
So that means basically everyone has a local data center.
Exactly.
Okay, that's quite a fascinating idea.
Exactly, because if you combine all like mobile devices which are around, that's way more powerful than all data centers combined worldwide. And we want to leverage this processing power, data storage, and so on. And that's what we built this protocol for.
Yeah, so sorry, I have less a technical question, more a philosophical question. I love the concept, love the idea, decentralized systems, but isn't this a very, you could say, Western or European, US kind of fantasy? I mean, if you look at later in our panel, I'm going to talk a bit about smart cities. The 10 largest smart cities or largest cities in the world, none of them is going to be in the US or in Europe. And if you know how, I mean, let's take helium, for example. I think for DePIN, helium is often given as a good example. You put your antenna out there, you have a decentralized system with tokens. But in many countries of the world, the governments, I'm talking about governance, right? The governments will not be in favor of people just organizing themselves with DePIN and DeFi and these things. So in many cities, maybe that stuff will be declared illegal. So how do you see maybe 10, 15, 20 years ahead, right? Where will that DePIN work? Do you really see it as a global thing that will from China to Brazil, from Alaska to down to Australia, everyone will use it? Or is it maybe it's a local phenomenon that will be running in a couple countries, but not really everywhere?
Yeah, there are multiple aspects to this. So on the one hand, the application needs to be so easy to use that basically the messenger we build, it's as easy to use as on WhatsApp, but you don't get any of the decentralized complexity behind it. But still, you're operating it yourself. So you are, with your friends, becoming your own platform. So you're running basically a decentralized app on your 3 devices or 5 devices, and no one can prohibit that you use your mobile phone or a computer and run an application on it, your private application. So you cannot suppress it. Obviously, legally, you can say, okay, you're not allowed to run a certain application. I mean, China tried it with Bitcoin, so you're not allowed to mine Bitcoin in China. So those people went, and after a while, they realized, okay, maybe that's a bad decision. So they came back. I mean, governments currently are trying to control the middleman in order to enforce their stance in the world. And they know how powerful those Googles, Apples, Amazons, and so on are. And that's why, for example, the EU Parliament made all these new laws, like the platform law or the DMA Act, which basically allows them to control this middleman and get rid of information which they do not like to be public. And by eliminating this, and you can only do it with a true decentralized technology, which is also not technologically, but also organizationally decentralized. In this case, there is no attack vector for anyone. So, like a hacker or the government. So that's eliminated, and that's deep in the foundation of what we built.
Just a very, very small addition, because I talked about the exact same topic with Shipra Narangzuri, who is very deep into the topic of smart cities. She's from the UN and works in Nairobi. And I think one of the greatest markets, because you asked the question, what is happening in 20 years, could be Africa for this exact technology, because you see very, very small Wi-Fi coverage, but people with smartphones all over the place. And this is all you need. We have the technological foundation to use smartphones, and we don't need to rely on Wi-Fi anymore. And when there's power outages, which happens often, he was in Africa, he told the story. You tell the story better, but I think in 20 years, this might be one of the greatest markets for that. So I don't think it's a European or very Western phenomenon, but a human phenomenon.
Yeah. So I was in Africa last year, and basically every Maasai, they cannot read, but everyone has a mobile phone. It's crazy. And they used to interact with each other. Basically everything runs on WhatsApp there, and there's like 6 or 7 hours and days power outage, so they don't have power and those networks aren't working anymore. And with our technology, you could still communicate. So for example, you can build relays, which, a cab driver which goes from one city to the other city could pick up information and spread it in the decentralized network. And that was also one idea. How can we build the protocol in a way that it's actually so resilient that it even runs when you have internet outage, so you can still transfer a message from A to B.